Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Friday afternoon. I hope wherever you are, it is as warm and sunny as it is here in Malvern, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm joining you from in the Visitor Center at the Wharton Esherick Museum. My name is Maria. I'm the Visitor Engagement Manager at the museum, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with our relatively new Spotlight Talk series, we did just start them this year, and maybe wondering what we're doing here today, allow me to very quickly explain. So the museum remains closed to in-person visitors, unfortunately. We've been closed for the better part of the last year. So we've taken that opportunity to bring a lot of our programming online, which has allowed us to reach new audiences and even add a bunch of new programs. We've done a number of virtual programs on a bunch of topics already, and although we are hoping to be able to reopen to in-person visitors soon, we've got no plans to slow down with these. Coming up on April 8th, we will have the next in our Curator Conversation series, in which our Director of Curatorial Affairs and Strategic Partnerships, Emily Zilber, will speak to Mary Savig of the Renwick Gallery. And we have a full events calendar on our website with a whole list of upcoming events, so definitely keep up to date with that. Our Spotlight Talks are very brief monthly virtual talks, each focused on a different piece or group of pieces from our collection. Previous talks are available on our YouTube channel or the past programs page of our website. Next month, we will be celebrating Earth Day on April 22nd and the arrival of spring, maybe a little late, with a look at just a few of Esherick's outdoor sculptures. So I hope you can join us for that one. Today, we are going to focus the spotlight on Wharton's printing press. So allow me to share my screen here. I am lucky enough to be joined by a bunch of my amazing colleagues today. Emily Zilber and Communications and Special Programs Manager Katie Wynn are standing by in the chat. They're going to help answer any questions that you may have. Otherwise, I've set aside a few minutes at the end. If you'd rather kind of shout them out at that time, go ahead and do that. I do ask that you please keep yourself muted until then, because there's a lot I want to show you and we don't have a whole lot of time. If you're comfortable turning your video on, go ahead and do that though, because I would love to see you. So on that note, let's go ahead and get started. So the inspiration for today's program came from the opening of Imprint, which was just a couple of weeks ago. Imprint is our annual high school printmaking competition and exhibition. Well, historically, this was a physical exhibit housed in the relatively small quarters of our visitor center, which is where I am now, a building that once served as Esherick's garage. That has, of course, since had to change, so Imprint is now a virtual exhibition. If you head to our website, whartonesherickmuseum.org, under Programs and Exhibitions, you can see it. While today's program was inspired by Imprint, Imprint was originally started about 10 years ago, and that was inspired by Wharton's time as a printmaker. So before I get into that, I want to talk about that a little bit today. I wanted to introduce you to the star of our show today. I wanted to show you this video I got. If you've ever been to the museum, you've probably seen the press where it's kind of tucked away now. It's sort of hard to miss in the sculpture well, this kind of funky cavern that Wharton dug into the floor, initially in response to a massive termite infestation under the floor. Keep in mind, as we head down the stairs here, this is not what you would normally be doing on a typical tour at the museum. Just view of the press today. And there it is. I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of where we have it tucked away now, but we'll talk about some of the different places where it's been. First, if you're familiar with Esherick, you know that understanding how he came to acquire and use the press starts with at least some understanding of the very complicated path that his career took. He started out drawing. He was drawing almost from the beginning. On the left, a fantastic sketch that he did for his high school yearbook. In school, he studied painting. I've got an example of one of his paintings on the right. That one's called Farmhouse. It is the first house where he and his wife, Letty, lived when they first arrived here to this property. I really like this one. As you can tell in the American Impressionist style, but he often struggled to find his voice as a painter. He really had trouble setting himself apart from the others who were painting in this style. So lucky for him, a few years after they arrived to the farmhouse in 1919, Wharton and Letty took a trip down to Fairhope, Alabama, where she was hoping to study organic education with a woman named Marietta Johnson to help supplement the family's income. So on the bottom left, a photo of Marietta and some of her students from a few years prior. Above that, some fun and games at Marietta's organic school down in Alabama. And on the right, Wharton in Fairhope. While he was there, out of necessity, he started carving his own wooden frames in which to exhibit his paintings. He couldn't seem to find a single frame in town there. And that simple act sparked a new interest for him in wood. His career was really about to take a turn. It was also on this trip that he had a chance meeting with this woman, Mary Marcy. She was a writer who would ask Wharton to illustrate a book of poems for children on the very highly controversial subject of evolution before it was even legal to teach it in schools. The book was called Rhymes of Early Jungle Folk. Esherick did about 70 or so wood blocks, and this would really help to kick off a really key chapter in his career as a printmaker, of course, the focus of our program today. He would go on to make almost 400 wood blocks, many with the help of that printing press, which we will see again in just a minute. And again, this chapter served as sort of a bridge of sorts in his career between Esherick the painter and Esherick the wood sculptor and furniture maker. So I figured what better print to start with than change, 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 sort of the unofficial theme of today. This one is from Rhymes of Early Jungle Folk. So again, this would be among the earliest, one of the many beautiful prints that he did of animals. Clearly, the state of Alabama is really important in Esherick's story as well, and it's made its way into his prints on many occasions. I've got just a couple of examples here for you from this wonderful series he did on some of the beautiful trees they have down there. We've got Alabama magnolia on the left and Alabama pine on the right. I wanted to return for just a brief moment to the theme of literature. On the left here, a print called Philadelphia Centaur Shop, and on the right, Bookshop. Both depict the Centaur Bookshop, which was this small, progressive, intellectual bookshop located on Chancellor Street in Philadelphia. Wharton first walked in when he returned from Alabama trying to sell copies of Rhymes of Early Jungle Folk, but he ended up getting drawn into this really interesting kind of avant-garde fold of thinkers and makers. The Centaur, more specifically the Centaur Press, which was an offshoot of the Centaur Bookshop that they started around 1924, would end up bringing Wharton a lot of his work. He did a bunch of illustrations for them. He made a sign, he designed their logo, and he even exhibited some of his prints in the shop. In addition to Rhymes of Early Jungle Folk, he illustrated the first publication for the Centaur Press, a 1924 edition of Walt Whitman's Song of the Broad Axe, which is where that print in the middle, Song of the Broad Axe, too, obviously comes from. He also illustrated D.H. Lawrence essays, which is where the porcupine on my t-shirt comes from. And that's just to name a few. So that brings me back to the star of today's show. You may be wondering where this really impressive printing press came from. I wanted to give you a little bit of historical background in case I have any of my fellow history buffs with me today. The Washington Press was named for our first president, of course, and you see his image there on it along with Ben Franklin's, apparently because both were interested in the written word. R. Hoe and Company, whose name you also see here, dominated production of these in the 19th century. And during that time, these were among the most popular in the country. So as I understand from my reading, once the patents expired, there were a few firms that started producing them well into the 20th century. So where does this particular press come in? We think that it was made sometime in the 1840s. It was once the property of a local newspaper called the Pottstown Mercury, which is still in existence today. It's about 20 miles away from the studio here. When Wharton heard they were getting rid of it, sometime in the early 1920s, so around the same time, he headed over in his Model T and somehow loaded this nearly 1-ton cast iron printing press and brought it back home, where it has more or less remained ever since. Though he wouldn't be making woodblocks for much longer, he kept printing with this press into the 60s, so he was using it for about 40 years. You may be wondering what he was doing to print his blocks, before the press. And the answer is that he would use just about anything he could get his hands on to further his art. In this case, anything from a spoon to a rolling pin. One thing to know about Wharton is that he was incredibly resourceful. So you may be wondering how the press actually works. So if I can give you just a quick summary, essentially you ink a block, you apply the paper, and they both go into a bed that you crank out from the press. You wheel it back in under that big iron plate you see there underneath the arm. That's a toggle system that as I understand from my reading, was a very key technological innovation that came along with this press in the 19th century. About 10 years ago, we had a demonstration. We had a printmaking instructor from the University of Pennsylvania, which incidentally now occupies the same space in Philadelphia where Wharton's childhood home was, so kind of full circle there. They came out and they demonstrated the press for us. That was before I started, so honestly, I'm kind of hoping they do another one. I think it looks like a lot of fun. I included that close-up shot of the block they were printing. That's one of my favorites. It's called Hickory Dickory. It's a poster advertising a play that was being put on at the Hedgerow Theater, a local community theater, which is about 20 miles or so, still is about 20 miles or so away from the museum. The entire Esherick family is really active there. And that's yet another popular theme for Esherick's prints is the theater, in particular the Hedgerow Theater. So despite being really heavy, again, the press has somehow made it to a number of different places since Wharton first brought it home. It started out in his farmhouse, which is just down the hill from the studio. I don't know if it's true or not, but I once heard that it may have even been in his studio bedroom. If you've ever been in the museum, you understand just how difficult that would be. And if you haven't, just imagine having a printing press in your bedroom. I mean, on the right, a photo of the printing press just above the sculpture wall on the main floor. So back up those spiral stairs that I took in my video to show you where it is now. Don't ask me how or why he moved it so much. I'm really not sure. The other picture here, Wharton at the press himself, which sort of reminds me of this print on the left here, Washington Press. For me, one of the most fun things about the press is how it itself has become a subject of his art, which I think really reveals his feelings about the press, his relationship with the press. The other one here is untitled, which is, I know, a lot harder to make out, but I love these two next to each other. I think there's just one of many examples of how many different styles he tried over the course of his career and how he was never really afraid to try anything new. They're so different aesthetically. So it was experiences like this, like his time in Alabama and the introduction to wood that brought that led him to give up painting altogether by 1925 and to devote himself to wood full time. So that, of course, meant that he would need more space to work as a full-time woodworker. So then he started construction of a new studio the following year. The finished product we now know as the Wharton Esherick Museum, which is what you see here. Though he moved primarily into wood sculpture and wood furniture very soon after that, as I mentioned, he didn't spend a whole lot of time as a printmaker. I think that the influence of a relatively short time in his career really transcends all of his work. You can really see it in a lot of other things, like the way he carves furniture, for example. So important to the trajectory of his career, key to the foundation of the museum itself. So that is all I have for you today, and I thank you all again so much for joining us. I wanted to include this little screen recording in case you're interested in exploring more. As you see here, if you go to our Explore page, you will find that events calendar. You will find at-home activities, collection highlights, our blog, much more. So I hope you can visit us there. I hope that you'll be able to join us for future virtual programs. And once we're open, I do hope that you might be able to come see us in person. For now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up to any comments or questions. Anyone have any?
Hi, Maria. You may have said this already. Do you have any idea when you might open?
We don't have a date right now, but we're hoping sometime soon.
Okay. I'm just asking because we're going to be out in Philadelphia for the flower show. And if you were open, we would definitely spread the word so other people could come also. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Stay tuned there. That'll be advertised on our website, on all of our social media channels.
Maria?
Yeah.
I have a question about the prints. I collect a lot of Wharton's prints, and I've had a hard time finding kind of a master list of all of his prints and when they were done and where they might have been published. There is one book that I have that's fairly common that has a lot of his prints in it, but is there anything online through the museum or access to anything like that?
You're looking for like an inventory list, or?
Yeah, that maybe has a copy of the actual print and says this was done, this many copies, and published in certain magazines, certain dates, and so on.
Not to my knowledge. Katie and Emily, jump in if you know about something I don't, but we can try to link you to anything that we might be able to find in our confirmation email.
All right. Because occasionally I come across some that I've bought, and I know they were taken out of publications, but I can't figure out what the original publication was. They're just like magazine prints or something. But there was some old magazine that I've got some from. I forget the name of it. Century Magazine or something like that. And I have several of his books, but no, I'm just always kind of, there's certain ones I have no clue when he did them and so on.
If you want to reach out to us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll chime in, Maria, just to say that there is one of the things on our online resources page is a comprehensive bibliography. I think there's some of the information that might be useful to you there, but we can also sort of work with you on specific questions. But I would definitely check out this sort of comprehensive bibliography, and we'll make sure that we link to it in the follow-up from today's program.
That's great. Thanks a lot. I'll look for that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if you wanted to reach out to us about specific prints, I'm sure we could help you with those as well.
Okay.
Maria, how many wood blocks do you all have at the museum, the original ones of Esherick's?
Emily, do you have a number? I don't know if I have an exact number.
But obviously you have a lot of them. He kept them and they continued to the museum.
Right, exactly.
We do, and we still they're used for restrikes at times. So they're still very much making wonderful work. Maria, I see a question here from Brian asking that he soon quit making wood blocks, but what else did he print on the press?
Well, my understanding of it was that he wasn't carving physical blocks. I think most of his that I've seen come from the mid to late 20s. So he wouldn't be carving physical blocks after that, but my understanding would be that he would continue to print what was already carved. If I'm mistaken about that, correct me.
Then I see we've got another question in the chat. One of the examples you showed looked like a lino cut. Do you have many lino blocks?
I'm not aware of any of those. All of them that I'm aware of are woodcuts and wood engravings. Anyone else? Okay, well, if you think of any, you can feel free to reach out to us at any time. My email address is maria@whartonesherickmuseum.org. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff, and I will call in my colleagues to help me if I need to. So Now, our tradition with these is for everyone to kind of unmute themselves and say a big goodbye at once. So if you're comfortable, I'm going to go ahead and do that now.
Bye.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You.